Padre Pio always said that no soul, no matter how prepared, truly understands what awaits it the moment it stands before God for the first time. Not judgment, not condemnation, not even mercy in the way we imagine it. What awaits is something far more overwhelming, far more terrifying, and far more beautiful than any human theology can adequately describe. It is the moment when every mask falls away, every pretense dissolves, and the soul sees itself exactly as God has always seen it, completely, utterly, without filter or defense. It happened on a winter evening in 1959. Padre Pio had been hearing confessions all day, his stigmata bleeding more profusely than usual, a sign that always preceded profound spiritual encounters. As the last penitent left and the chapel emptied into twilight silence, he felt the familiar shift in the atmosphere, that thinning of the veil between worlds that announced the presence of a soul in transition. But this was different. This wasn't a confused spirit lingering near the threshold. This was a soul being escorted, carried, really, toward its first encounter with the divine. And Padre Pio, through a grace he never asked for, but could not refuse, was permitted to witness it. The soul appeared as a woman, perhaps 60 years old, her spiritual form still clinging to the appearance of her earthly body. She looked bewildered, trembling, but not from fear, from anticipation, from the overwhelming awareness that something monumentally significant was about to happen. "Where am I?" she asked, though her voice came not from lips, but from the essence of who she was. "You are in the space between," Padre Pio answered gently. "Your body has died. Your soul has been released. And now you are being prepared for what comes next." She looked down at herself, translucent, luminous, somehow more real than she had ever been in flesh. "I died, but I feel so alive, more alive than I ever felt before." "Because you are meeting yourself for the first time," Padre Pio said. "The person you were always meant to be, beneath all the fear and pretense and self-deception. Death strips away the costume. What remains is truth." The woman, her name was Caterina, Padre Pio somehow knew, had lived an ordinary life. A school teacher, a widow, 3 children, all grown. She had attended Mass regularly, prayed the rosary, tried to be kind. Not a saint, but not a sinner either. Just human. Flawed, well-meaning, occasionally selfish, occasionally generous. Like most people. "What happens now?" Caterina asked. Before Padre Pio could answer, the chapel dissolved. Not literally. The stones remained, the candles still flickered. But the spiritual reality shifted, and suddenly they were standing in a place that wasn't a place. A threshold, a doorway, and beyond it, a light so intense it should have been blinding, but somehow wasn't. It called to Caterina the way a mother's voice calls a lost child home. "You must go forward," Padre Pio said quietly, "into that light, into the presence of God." Terror gripped her. Not the terror of punishment, but something deeper. The terror of being fully known, of having every secret thought, every hidden motive, every moment of cowardice and selfishness exposed in the presence of perfect love. "I'm not ready," she whispered. I'm not good enough. If he sees everything, he already sees everything, Padre Pio interrupted gently. He has always seen everything. The encounter doesn't reveal you to God. It reveals God to you. And in that revelation, you finally see yourself as you truly are. Caterina took a step forward, then hesitated. Padre Pio watched as celestial beings, not angels with wings and harps, but presences of pure light and purpose, moved beside her, not dragging her forward, but simply accompanying, bearing witness. And then she crossed the threshold. What Padre Pio saw in that moment would haunt him for the rest of his life, not because it was horrifying, but because it was so overwhelmingly, devastatingly beautiful that human language could never adequately contain it. Caterina stood in the presence of God, not a bearded figure on a throne, not a judge with scales, but a presence, infinite, all-encompassing, burning with a love so intense it was almost unbearable. The kind of love that sees everything and loves anyway. The kind of love that knows your worst sin and still calls you beloved. The kind of love that is both terrifyingly holy and impossibly tender. And in that moment, Caterina saw herself through God's eyes. She saw the school teacher who had patiently helped struggling students, staying late without pay to tutor a boy everyone else had given up on. She saw the young mother who had sung lullabies to sick children through long, exhausted nights. She saw the widow who had chosen not to remarry because she felt called to serve her aging mother instead. But she also saw the moments she had forgotten or tried to forget. The colleague she had gossiped about, destroying a reputation with careless words. The beggar she had stepped over on her way to Mass, too busy to stop. The son whose dreams she had dismissed because they didn't match her expectations. The thousands of small, everyday cruelties that accumulate over a lifetime. The impatient words, the withheld kindness, the love that could have been given but wasn't. All of it, simultaneously. The good and the bad, the beauty and the ugliness, the moments of grace and the moments of failure. Nothing hidden, nothing excused, nothing explained away. Caterina fell to her knees, or the spiritual equivalent of kneeling, under the weight of it all. The shame was crushing, not because God was condemning her, but because she was seeing, truly seeing, who she had been. And the gap between who she was and who she could have been felt like an unbridgeable chasm. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I wasted so much. I could have loved more. I should have been better. I thought I was good, but I see now. And then God spoke, not in words. Words are too small, too limited. But in a communication that bypassed language entirely and spoke directly to the core of her being. And what God communicated was this: I know. I have always known. And I have always loved you anyway. The shock of it nearly unmade her. Not judgment, not disappointment, not conditional acceptance based on her having done enough good to outweigh the bad. Just love. Unconditional, relentless, pursuing love that had been there her entire life, even in the moments when she was most unlovable. Katerina looked up, not at a face, but into the infinite presence, and for the first time understood what mercy actually meant. Not leniency, not overlooking sin, but love so powerful it transforms the sinner while fully acknowledging the sin. "You see what I could have been," she whispered. "The person I was meant to be. And you grieve for all the ways I fell short." "Yes," came the wordless reply. "But I also rejoice in every moment you chose love, however imperfectly. Every time you tried, even when you failed. Every time you got back up after falling. Do you know how precious those moments are to me?" Tears, if a soul can weep, poured from Katerina, because she was experiencing something human theology struggles to articulate. God mourns our failures, not because He is disappointed in us, but because He knows the joy and freedom we could have experienced if we had trusted Him more. He grieves not as a judge, but as a father watching his beloved child settle for less than she was created for. And then came the second revelation, the one that shattered Katerina completely. God showed her how her life had mattered, how the boy she had tutored grew up to become a doctor who saved lives, how her patient presence during her mother's final illness had taught her children how to love sacrificially, how a single smile she had given to a stranger on a train had prevented a suicide she never knew was being contemplated, how her prayers, the thousands of ordinary, distracted, half-hearted prayers she thought barely counted, had been heard and answered in ways she had never imagined. "I thought I was so insignificant," she breathed. "You were never insignificant," God communicated. "Every soul is a universe. Every choice ripples through eternity. You mattered more than you could possibly comprehend." But there was still the matter of purification. Because Katerina, like most souls, was not yet ready for the fullness of heaven. The sins she had confessed and been forgiven for sacramentally on earth were pardoned, their guilt removed. But their effects, the ways they had wounded her soul and shaped her into someone less than she was meant to be, still remained. Scars that needed healing, distortions that needed correction. God showed her what this purification would entail. Not fire, not torture, not divine punishment, but a process of letting go, of releasing every attachment, every self-justification, every remnant of pride and fear that still clung to her soul. It would hurt, not because God wanted her to suffer, but because transformation always involves pain. The pain of a broken bone being reset, the pain of a wound being cleaned before it can heal. "How long?" she asked. Time, God showed her, didn't work the same way in this realm. What might feel like moments to those on earth could be experienced as years in purgatory, or vice versa. Because purification isn't about duration, it's about completion. She would remain until she was fully herself, the self God had envisioned before the foundation of the world. "Will I be alone?" And here God gave her a gift that made Katerina weep with gratitude. She saw the prayers rising from earth like incense, like light, like lifelines. Her children, lighting candles in church. Her grandchildren, saying bedtime prayers that included, "God bless Grandma." Even people she barely remembered, who remembered her and occasionally thought, I hope Katerina is at peace. Every prayer shortens your purification, God showed her. Every Mass offered for your soul hastens your healing. You are never alone. The Church on earth, the Church in purgatory, the Church in heaven, all are one body. And that body prays for itself constantly. Then came the final revelation, the one that Padre Pio later said was almost too sacred to speak of. God showed Katerina a glimpse of what awaited her when purification was complete. Not just heaven as a place, but heaven as a state of being. Perfect union with God, perfect joy, perfect love, perfect peace. Seeing God face to face, not through the veil of her imperfection, but in the fullness of her restored, healed, completed self. It was so beautiful that even the prospect of purification felt like a gift, because she knew, with absolute certainty, where it was leading. I'm ready, Katerina said, and she meant it. The light began to shift, preparing to escort her to her purification. But before she left, she turned back, toward the chapel where Padre Pio still knelt, watching this sacred encounter. Tell them, she said, her voice ringing across dimensions. Tell everyone who will listen. God is not what we think. He is so much more. Tell them not to be afraid of death. Tell them not to waste their lives on things that don't matter. And tell them, her voice broke with emotion, tell them they are so deeply loved, more loved than they can possibly imagine. And then she was gone, carried by angels into her purification, already beginning the journey toward her ultimate healing. Padre Pio remained kneeling for hours, unable to move, unable to speak. What he had witnessed was too profound for immediate processing. He had seen the first encounter between a soul and God, the moment of total revelation, total vulnerability, total truth, and also total mercy. Later, when he could finally speak of it, he said this: the first encounter with God is the most terrifying and most beautiful moment a soul will ever experience. Terrifying because we see ourselves exactly as we are. Every failure, every sin, every missed opportunity laid bare. Beautiful because we simultaneously see how God has always seen us, beloved children, precious despite our flaws, worth dying for even at our worst. The judgment we fear is not God's condemnation, but our own recognition of how far short we fell of what love called us to be. And the mercy we receive is not God's willingness to overlook our sins, but His fierce determination to heal us, transform us, and bring us home, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much purification we need. He continued, every soul that stands before God experiences this same revelation. Not one is turned away who desires mercy. Not one is condemned who confesses their need. But also, not one is left unchanged. Because love that powerful, that holy, that all-consuming cannot leave us as we are. It must make us new. And that newness begins the moment we say, with Katerina, I'm ready. Years later, one of the friars asked Padre Pio if he feared death, having seen what awaited souls on the other side. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his weathered face, and said simply, I used to fear judgment. Now I only long for the encounter. Because I know what awaits me is not an angry judge, but a loving Father who has been waiting my entire life to finally embrace me without barriers. How can I fear that? This is what Padre Pio witnessed. This is what awaits every soul in its first encounter with God. Not what we've been taught to fear, but what we've always longed for. To be fully known and fully loved, without condition, without end, forever.